I get questions about my Commonplace book all of the time. I actually think it might be the thing I'm asked about most. Commonplace books were particularly popular during the Renaissance period, but we are definitely having a renaissance now. There seems to be so much more interest in commonplacing. In the last few years, I know that quite a few people online have started using commonplacing, and I've been keeping my own one for roughly a year now, very much inspired by early modern practices and specifically John Locke. A commonplace book is basically a place for storing eclectic things, compiling different things together in one single place and making your own sort of encyclopedia. Ideas, information, facts, quotes, all of these go together into your own handheld pocket commonplace book, and you're able to keep them all together and store them, keep hold of them, make sure that they don't get lost. Many great thinkers have kept commonplace books, for example Oscar Wilde, Ian Forster, John Locke, many people during the early modern period actually, because as I say, it was very popular then. I'm going to be talking about how and why I use my commonplace book in this video, but if you do want to learn more and you want to go a bit further with this, you want to learn more about how commonplacing can help you think, can help you with research projects, can help you to put together information and synthesize thinking in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect to. I've actually filmed an 8-episode class on Skillshare, all about commonplacing and how you can use it to cultivate curiosity. So if you watch this and you want to go further, then definitely consider doing that. It's basically this video, but a deeper dive. Skillshare is of course the world's largest online learning community, and I have wanted to add to this community and add to the repertoire of classes for such a long time, and I've actually now done that. So if you are interested to learn, then please do click on the link in the description box. If you're interested, the first 500 people to click on the link in the description box can also get 1 month of Skillshare for free, which is kind of amazing. So if you're interested to do my class or any of the many other classes that they have on Skillshare, then do consider clicking on that link. Honestly, there are so many things you can learn on Skillshare, and every time I scroll through, I'm kind of overwhelmed by just how many choices there are. But anyway, with that said, let's get on to this slightly more succinct guide to commonplacing, which hopefully still will be very, very helpful. Commonplacing is essentially very, very simple, and possibly more simple than you expect it to be. I can almost guarantee that you have been commonplacing without realising that you are commonplacing, because as Adam Smyth says, he's an early modern academic and critic, and when speaking about early modern England, he says that it was more than just people using commonplace books, but it was a commonplacing culture. He's pointing to the practice, the act of collating information, of active reading which collates information. And commonplacing, in this slightly broader understanding, is definitely something that we all do. Even on your phone, when you take screenshots of quotes or graphics or images and store them together in a folder, you are engaging in an act of commonplacing. Because all commonplacing essentially is compiling ideas, information, media and content under different headings and kind of sorting them into your own categories. And there are so many different modes, types of commonplacing, like guides to commonplacing, which have been published over the centuries. There isn't kind of a single right way to do it, but I'm going to talk through how I commonplace, which is a variation on the John Locke method. I basically like to think of your commonplace book as your own mini encyclopedia of things that interest you. So this is like an encyclopedia of my brain and an encyclopedia of the things that I find interesting, and that of course is going to be very different to what you would put in your own kind of encyclopedia of your interests, because obviously they're going to be different. And that's the beauty of a commonplace book, that they are just so individual. You could also use commonplace books for different things. So this is my general commonplace book. But this is if I can find it, because I've just been losing stuff left, right and centre recently. I'm pretty sure I've got one here. Yes, okay, this one. But then this is for juvenilia specifically. I've also got ones for all of the different essays that I did during my master's degree. So you can either keep a general one or you can keep it related to a specific theme. And that kind of thematic commonplacing is something that you might remember from A Series of Unfortunate Events if you were a fan of that book series and television series, because Klaus of course does keep a commonplace book, a dark blue commonplace book where he compiles all of this information related to VFT, and by putting all of this information side by side, he's able to draw connections between things which we wouldn't necessarily expect to be linked. So to set up your book, very, very easy. I would first of all recommend just going through and numbering the pages if they're not already numbered. So this one is a Lockean 1917 notebook, and these come already numbered, which honestly makes them very good for commonplacing. But if it's not numbered, then just go through and number it first of all. And you also want to leave some space at the beginning for your index. So there are many different types of commonplacing, but the one that I adhere to is a variation on the Lockean method. So I'm going to introduce you to this method because it's my personal favourite, and I think it's the easiest one to use. So when you commonplace, you store information under specific headings. So for example here, these are all quotes related to writing, the act of writing, and some commonplaces will have all of these alphabetically. So writing would be right at the end of this notebook, but I feel like that's unnecessarily complicated because you don't necessarily know when and what you are going to want to write about because you don't know what you've read yet. John Locke's method, however, says that you just write the heading as and when you come across it, which I think makes so much more sense. And this is a method that John Locke set out in his 1685 book, which was a new method of making commonplace books, which sets out the method of commonplacing, which he himself had been following for quite a long period. So just to give you an example, these are the kinds of headings that I've got in mind, and these have just come up as I've been reading. So I didn't kind of go through and add these in at the beginning. So for example, when I read this poem by Catherine Phillips, so if my ink through malice proved to stain, my blood should justly wash it off again. And that was from a poem by Catherine Phillips, and I wrote that under the heading of writing. And then when I read this quote from Robert Blair, fled forever as they never had been, I thought that was also relevant to writing, so I added that under that same heading. Didn't write a new one. But obviously in having all of these eclectic headings, the important part is the index. And I do keep an index, but I do not keep the kind of index which John Locke recommends. So John Locke recommends an alphabetical index, very similar to the kind of thing that you would get in an encyclopedia. So you separate the page into boxes, a box for every letter of the alphabet, and then this gives you space to kind of fill in your headings alphabetically. However, honestly, I'm just so bad with spacing that I decided not to do this and have a much more basic index instead. I just put the heading and then I put the page number next to it, and it's not quite as intuitive as John Locke's. Maybe when I finish this commonplace book and I start another one, I will try the John Locke method, but this is what I do and I find that it works really well. So this, for example, is my index, and as you can see, for some of the headings there are multiple page numbers, and I love this because if I realise that I want to find a quote on friendship, I know that I need to go to page 31. And then these are all quotes on friendship. And that is the method. That is all you need to know about commonplacing. But I'm going to go a tiny bit further. I want to tell you how I actually use this. Okay, so how do I actually use my commonplace book? I actually have two commonplace books, but this is my neat one, and this is the one that I use actively. I do like this to be fairly neat though, and especially if I'm sitting in a lecture or I'm having a conversation with somebody, I don't necessarily always have time to neatly write out the quote that I want to write. I do like to keep this fairly neat because I like to actively use it. And so I have a messy notebook where I will jot things down during the day. So if I'm in a lecture and there's something that I want to write down, I might just make a note of it. Or if I am having a conversation with someone, they say something really astute, I might just jot it down in here, and then I will just go through this and transfer to this. I've got to say that I haven't updated everything from here yet though. I need to sit down and go through it all properly. Similarly, and I am actually up to date with this one, I will go through my camera roll and look for things that I've screenshotted and transferred those quotes into my commonplace book. I do think it has to be a kind of routine thing, and I try to do about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes of commonplacing every evening, because otherwise it just compiles and you never end up writing down these things that you want to write down. You want to always be adding to your commonplace book. Also in mine, slightly unusually, maybe I have vocab lists too, so words that I've just learned so that I can kind of try and remember them and start using them. I also always keep this on me. I kind of treat it a bit like a reading book, so if whenever I'm waiting for somebody, if I've got a spare few minutes, I will either read my book or I will read my commonplace book. This is just all things that you find interesting, and so of course it's going to be nice to read through. I also really like kind of memorizing some of my favourite quotes, and so if I'm sitting somewhere by myself, I might just go through and try and memorize a few of these, because I've saved them for a reason, and so why not try and save them up here too. That's how I use a Commonplace book. But now let's go on to the why. Why do I think you should use a Commonplace book, and why are they useful? Number one, very, very importantly, it makes you an active reader. As opposed to just reading things passively, you're always kind of looking for something. You're looking for something that interests you. You're looking for something which you can transfer from the book into your own book. And and I have noticed this actually, it just kind of changes the way that you read certain things. Like when I'm reading a really nice passage, when I'm particularly intrigued by an idea I read in an article, I'm thinking, okay, well, how can I transfer this into my Commonplace book? What is the core idea? What is the best quote that can kind of summarize what I've read here and what I want to remember? And I find that it just makes you a slightly more critical thinker and more active when you're reading. Carlo Truzani, who wrote The Kite Runner, says, reading is an active, imaginative act. It takes work, and commonplacing encourages us to read actively. I think more than that, it kind of becomes representative of your power as a reader over the material. It kind of gives you ownership of what you're reading, and not in a possessive way, but in an empowering way. I think it reminds you that what you read does impact your own life and can have a very tangible impact on your own life, and that's going to happen anyway, but the practice of commonplacing just makes that more clear to you. Adam Smyth says that it makes, quote, reading an active interventionalist practice. Number two, and this is kind of the most obvious one, but also possibly the most important one, it helps you keep track of things and information and just keep them together so that they don't get lost. Michael Stolberg calls it a paper technology, which I just love because it is a technology. It's like it's a form of storing information. Like other technology, it's helping you to another particular end. Like so often, literary flowers, Floriagia, I think that's what it's called in Latin, they get lost. Like you read these wonderful things, you learn these wonderful things, and then you lose them. Even if you write them down, if they're in all of these different places, if they're eclectically stored, you are going to lose them. Whereas if you have them here, like you've always got them with you, and I think there's something wonderful about that. I also really like the idea of kind of widening the corpus of things that I know. That's what helps you to think. If you can draw on more things, if you can if you've got this information and these quotes and these people that you can draw on, then that's going to help you to create your own ideas. It's going to help you in conversation, like especially if you can memorize some of the things that you're writing down. And when I stress the importance of memorization, it's not about kind of rote memorization and like reciting something for the sake of reciting it, but rather if you know it, then you can apply it and you can talk about it, and that's the value of memorization. Again, Smyth says in his essay on Commonplace book culture, which is definitely worth reading if you're interested in this, and this is him talking about why commonplacing was originally employed in the early modern period. Quote, by deploying these collected quotations in spoken or written discourse, compilers will be led to an eloquence of expression, and through this eloquence to a good moral life. Don't know about the good moral life part, but the eloquence of expression definitely. And then finally, and I would say this is the most important one, it helps you to draw connections between things. Definitely I was alluding to this in the conversation part of that last point. It leads you to synoptic thinking and putting things together that you wouldn't usually put together. It leads to thoughts which you wouldn't otherwise have had. So when you have like these different quotes from very different places, maybe from conversations with friends, from television shows, from contemporary books, from classics, from academic articles, and you've got all of these things compiled under a single heading, when you read these all together, you can think about like, how do these things connect? How do all of these things relate to education, even though they're from all of these different places? And it's that can help you think of something more innovative, can help you like create these more creative new ideas. That is where ideas come from. Commonplacing just becomes like a physical representation of your brain and your thoughts and helps you to think more clearly. But anyway, that is commonplacing. I hope that you found this video helpful. I know it took me ages to film. If you want to learn more about commonplacing, as I say, then please do consider taking the Skillshare class, which will be linked down below, and you can try for free if you're one of the first 500 people to click. If you want to learn any more about commonplacing, then do let me know as well if you've got any more questions, if there's anything else that I can talk through. Let me know, because commonplacing is something that I love and that I've become a massive fan of, and I could honestly rave about it for hours. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have more than just a productive week.